Drones are just another tool for infantry to kill other infantry with. Biden gave us a lot, and Ukraine is very thankful for Biden, but we needed more. He didn't do enough. Everything just completely get destroyed. Seeing that with your own eyes, like, that's an experience that is almost impossible to explain. It's a tough reality we live in, but the best thing we can do is wake up to it and do something about it. Oh, there we go. Air raid.
So I think this is the first time the air raid siren went off during the recording.
As I'm talking about, that TV is coming.
Exactly. Yeah. The irony. Man, like, I'm so happy to like finally meet you in person. Actually, we met before this.
We have.
We have, right? In the most interesting way possible.
I sat right behind you in a film premiere.
Did you?
Yeah, for Porcelain War.
Porcelain War?
Yeah, you went to see it in the theater, and I sat right behind you, but I'm like, is that Terrell? I had no clue.
How many black people are in this country, man?
Quite a few.
Well, okay. Well,
you're not the only one.
Well, you know, that's true. It's not okay, but how many of them look like me?
You know, you have a point there. All right.
See, that's all. I'm trying to be special, but you're not giving me the
I was
space
a little
to feel
shy.
that way. Sure you were. Yeah. Okay, but no, man. Like, the first time I saw you was in this movie called My Happy Place.
Yeah, it's just my happy place.
It's just my happy place. Yeah, and it's about your life, like growing up in Ukraine and your whole story of like coming back here to fight. Now I'm like, I want to interview this dude because you're a Ukrainian guy who moved here when you were 5 years old, and you moved to Brooklyn.
Yes, I
my
did.
home, Brooklyn. And the first thing, it was like, you were in Coney Island. I'm like, okay, it's a good number of black people in Coney Island. So I'm always interested in like this story of, growing up as a young Ukrainian in this city with like in Coney Island with this history, because you think about Coney Island, you think about He Got Game. It's a Spike Lee joint, and you went to Lincoln High School,
yep,
right, which is where the movie is based off of in large part. So, yeah, man, I definitely am happy to talk to you. But mainly, man, like, I really am interested in your story about coming back to fight, because you're making a real sacrifice in ways that most people just cannot relate to. And so, we're going to talk about how you came to the States and everything, but, just tell us about when the war started, how you felt, and what were you doing, and what were the events and the thoughts that led you to deciding that you want to come up here back to Ukraine, pick up a gun, and fight?
I mean, if I'm going to be honest, I thought about doing it the first day. Like that night when everything started to go down. What was it, around like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning here in Ukraine, where the bombing started, Russian planes were flying, artillery was going, kind of just attacking everything. I started seeing the footage of the Russian Grad, the missile salvos going into the Ukraine. And I remember seeing the first footage of the vehicles crossing the border, where I remember there's that one famous video of the Ukrainian border guard who started to basically retreat away from the actual border crossing. I remember the 23rd going into the 24th pretty vividly. I was in shock. I think everybody was like in a sort of shock and a state of panic, because we had no idea what to do. And I was in the U.S. and I'm like, okay, I need to contact my mom, my family, everybody. We're like, we need to do something, right? First reaction I remember was just help the family out. What are they going to do? What's their plan? At the time, not all of my relatives really were like, I'm going to leave. Most of them wanted to stay. I had a few relatives that did cross the border into Poland, one who actually also stayed in Slovakia. And the first kind of few days was just doing everything we can to help them, share information with other people I knew, other Ukrainians in, Coney Island, Brooklyn, New York in general, and do everything we can to just kind of help our people out, help each other out. And then I also remember starting to get more involved with all the Ukrainians who were coming out into the streets, especially in Manhattan, who started to do the rallies and stuff like that. So that was really the start of that, right? But there was a part of me that was like, I need to go over there, right? Because I'm very close to my family here, very close. Despite being 5, when part of my family would move to New York, I would consistently get the chance to go back to Ukraine, usually in the summers. Sometimes in the winters. I always preferred the winters. I like the cold. But I also really like celebrating New Year's in Ukraine because it is a celebration in Ukraine.
Oh yeah, trust me, I know it.
Yeah,
I know it firsthand.
it's one of the best holidays, right? And I never really lost that connection to Ukraine, despite assimilating to America pretty well, having mainly growing up there. I still stayed very close to Ukraine, and my family was very happy with that, even if it was just coming for a month or two at a time, right? But that's still a substantial amount of time every year, every other year to come visit. So I never really disconnected from that side of kind of my heritage and who I am. I was born there. I love the city I was born at. It's Bielitsadikva. It's a wonderful city. It got a lot bigger now, maybe a little too big, but it's a beautiful little city south of Kyiv, and I'm very proud of that city. I love the history behind it, and I always loved visiting it, especially in the summer. It's as hot as it is, it's beautiful there. We have a very famous park, and I got to take you there one day.
You gotta take me there, man. Like I want to see it, but I'm really interested in. So, what type of job? Like, what was your desk job back home?
Man, I've had several different jobs, but I did study aeronautical science, and I was working towards getting my flight ratings. I love flying. It was a huge passion of mine. And I was working towards that at that time, but I kind of put that all on pause. I prioritized Ukraine, my family, helping Ukrainians out, doing what I can to advocate for Ukraine for like 2 years. Wow. I'll be honest.
So you just got into the activism aspect of it and things like that, because I could just like you waking up to this is something I'm really interested in, because I woke up literally to explosions.
Yeah.
Like we all did, right? And you talk about the shock that you felt. And for me, it was a sensory overload. And I went into a physical shock, and I felt like I was floating, because when you're actually in a war environment, you're a soldier, so you have obviously a particular and unique experience to it. But for a civilian, when you don't know what's going to happen, your body, it just feels very light. Right. Because it's tensing up and it's preparing you for the worst that can possibly happen.
Right.
And when you all were hearing these stories about Russia is going, they said Russia could probably take over in 3 days or a week, whatever number that they gave. I know with us, what we saw down here, at least, where people are like, the hell with this, they're going to, people are fighting. And because at first I saw the shock, and the fear turned into anger, like real seething anger.
Of course.
And I think it's difficult for people who were not here, because the fear was there and the shock, but then people just said, "Fuck them."
Yeah.
Fuck them. Yeah. And that actually gave me kind of a spirit to say, okay, I want to see this. I want to see how they're going to fight and resist.
I mean, it made sense why we kind of, did that. Ukraine did try diplomacy in the very beginning. We tried everything. And it was pretty much clear in the first few days that this wasn't just about a little land grab or trying to teach us a lesson, right? This was them finally taking that opportunity to say, all right, let's try it. Let's try it. Let's try to beat them down, take it over. They did underestimate us. They thought we weren't going to fight, or we would just be too weak to resist. But thankfully, I would say that, we turned that anger into action, and we fought the Russians to some degree quite successfully. I mean, Ukraine is here. I always tell people, like, literally, it was in the very beginning. They said 3 days. 3 days passed, and it's like, oh, Ukraine is going to have like 2-3 weeks. And then that passed, and they're like, oh, maybe they'll hold off for a couple months, and it just kept going and going, and here we are, right? Which I'm very proud of, I have to say, because literally Russians are trying to exterminate us as a nation, as a people. They deny our existence. It's pretty obvious. I think it was from the time that we're having this interview, Medvedev literally admitted that all these peace talks and everything, it's not really for peace, right? They're just there to give their maximalist demands, to demand surrender, and that's really it, right? And I think that laid it out completely clearly, what this conflict is about. And I think there's only going to be one resolution to it, which is either the total defeat of one or the other side, and that's going to be it.
I totally agree with that. I want to talk to you. What is, when you talk about they want to annihilate us, I totally agree with that. I'm just curious about from your end when you're talking to Americans and
Mm-hmm.
different types of Americans too. I mean, just think about obviously the Ukrainian diaspora and you folks get in the people and who are in the larger Eastern Europe and kind of European support. But again, we're both from Brooklyn.
Right.
And what is it like telling people that the Russians want to exterminate us? Because people are, one, they look at you both as being white. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
Right? That's how
Yeah.
they look at
Yeah.
you. We
Yeah.
know that's not true, but
Right.
what is it like trying to reach across all of the larger American public, communicating the fact that this is just bigger than some disagreement over land, that they
Right.
just want to kill us all?
So it's definitely going to be an interesting answer, and it was definitely an interesting experience having to deal with that. In the beginning, people just generally kind of supported us, right? But even I'll say that people who kind of supported us, they maybe fully didn't understand what that actually meant. You know, the concept of the Russians aren't just here for a little land grab. They're not here to be diplomatic. They're here for, you know, just imperialistic purposes. And my issue is that Americans might sort of ideologically be in the right place, but at the same time, I don't think they actually fully it's just almost incapable. They're incapable of fully understanding to what extent this is like. Something that I'll be honest about, and this is something I've realized, especially once you come here, even before I, signed my first contract and got into service, just spending a little bit of time living like a civilian here, exploring, Ukraine, trying to assimilate basically to get used to it here. It really opened up everything because we are very safe in America. We are very safe. We have 2 oceans. We have 2 very friendly neighbors for the most part. That might change, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
we have 2 very friendly neighbors. We cooperate with them very well. We have wonderful agreements with them. And we have one of the most powerful militaries in the world. We have a wonderful, for the most part, economy. Yeah, there were issues there and there, but at the end of the day, we do pretty well. And I would say it created this sort of, how would I describe it? Maybe like naivete, that kind of word, where we all became very naive. I realized growing up in America, while there are certain values we believe in, we kind of don't fully understand what some of that actually meant, right? Something I'll tell people now is, if there's one thing that Ukrainians understand, and this is kind of like a thing, like a foundation for Ukrainians' belief on democracy and freedom, it's sacrifice. I think we really don't fully, I think us Americans, we kind of lost the understanding of, really the cost of everything. Whereas Ukrainians didn't, because Ukrainians have a very grounded view, right, of democracy, what freedom is, and I think as Americans, we kind of lost a lot of that, whereas we might be very correct on certain political issues and understandings and whatever, but at the end of the day, we apply our sort of values and our understanding of how our little world is to everyone else, and that's a huge problem. Because we have to realize that Russia is not like the United States. Neither is Ukraine. Neither is even Europe. There's a whole world outside the United States, outside of our 2 little oceans. We're, if anything, the simplest way I can describe it is America is like a little bubble, and we think the whole world is that bubble, and that's just not true, right?
You can say the same thing about New York.
Yeah. I mean, most cities.
or Brooklyn.
Yes. So we need to kind of understand that, and it is going to be hard to understand when you grew up with a lot of security, no matter how hard things were. Even I experienced a lot of hardship growing up in Brooklyn, right? There were times that were pretty hard, but everything got better at the end of the day, right? And it's kind of hard to people understand, that kind of struggle. We have our struggles, but
there's always a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, there is for us at least. In Ukraine, you don't know if there's that light's going to be at the end of the tunnel. That's the problem. And it's not just in Ukraine, it's really anywhere else in the world, let's be honest. So when I got here, I'll say that it really opened up a lot of things for me. It gave me a lot of perspective, right? I can kind of understand, I kind of said this to somebody, I can kind of understand some of the old World War II vets that I talk to, who've been through something similar, right? I can understand them a lot better, and I can see why a lot of them were facepalming when this was happening, and a lot of them were like, damn, we should be doing more, but we're not. So when it comes to America, really, it's like, okay, they can signal the correct virtues, right? But we don't really, I guess you can say, fully understand. Right. So what would happen is you had a lot of people who would really apply this perspective that is just completely like not real. Like people are like, oh, why don't you guys talk to, Russia? Why are you guys not, trying to tackle more diplomacy? All this nonsense, right? I was like, guys, it's bullshit. You really are going to try to talk. You want me to negotiate with the guy that's like literally killing my people? Like, let's just say someone breaks into your house. He's like violently killing and brutally killing your mom and dad, and you're going to try to talk to him. I'm like, guys, how do you negotiate with that, right? You don't.
Yeah.
You got to fight back.
Got to fight back, man. Like I was, I want to talk about, because I want to get into that later, but I want to ask you about, you go on the streets, you do the activism and all this other stuff, and you're at the protests at the start of the war, you're going on through this. And at some point you say, okay, I actually want to go back to my native country, pick up a gun and fight. Just tell me, when you ultimately made that choice? I'm going to join the army.
Yeah. When I first, I could say I made that choice from the beginning. The problem was figuring out how to actually correctly do it, right? In the beginning, as much as I wanted to, everybody that I knew was telling me not to do it. It's just, look, do what you can in the U.S. first. So I was like, okay, I'll do what I can. I got involved in activism. I got to volunteer with several NGOs. I even got to work with a NGO at one point. And we did really good work. I'm really proud of everything that we got to accomplish, right? All the money we were able to fundraise, all the just in general, all the attention we were able to gather on Ukraine, the unity we were able to create, the little community we were able to create there. We helped a lot of people. I remember helping refugees that were coming to New York. That was a really opening experience. But there was always this thing in me where, look, although my parents unfortunately split, I grew up with a lot of really strong women in my family, and I'm proud of them. I'm very proud of them. And my mom is a very tough person. Nobody messes with her in our area. Nobody. Everybody knows her. Nobody messes with that woman. And she's very protective, and so am I. I would say maybe she kind of instilled that in me, where, you got to protect the people around you, your family. And I would say that if anything, when this happened, where with the full-scale invasion, this is where I kind of asked myself, I'm like, listen, I have my set of principles, I have my set of beliefs, and I guess I kind of looked at myself and I'm like, am I really, do I really live up to that, right? And I care about my family here deeply. I have a very young cousin who's also named Yaroslav. And I love that. There's two of us. One went over to New York, and one stayed in one is in Bielotserkva. And I think about them and the fact that all these times that I got to visit Ukraine, I've only had good experiences. I loved staying with my family. They only showed me love. And Ukraine, it's the whole point of the movie. It's just my happy place. That's a quote that I used. That's how I would always describe Ukraine. In Bielotserkva, we have a little dacha that I always, that thing is just ingrained in me. And I have all these happy memories. I love my family, and they deserve everything. I wish that they could have the kind of life that I got in the United States, the security that I had, right? But that's being taken away from them. So there's just this push in me. It's like, I told myself, I'm like, look, I have my beliefs, I have my principles, and now is the time where I have to not think about just myself, but I have to think about the people that I love, the people around me, and I have to do what's right, and that's stand up and protect them.
Yeah, and so when you talk about finding the right way to do it, I'm interested in once you determine that right way, I wanted you to take me on that plane coming here, and then whether it's the train or the bus, whatever, because the only planes are in Ukraine are fighter jets, and so that journey to getting here and actually putting on the uniform that you have right now.
The actual journey here, if we want to get very specific with that, was actually crazy. It was a 3-day journey just to get to Ukraine, which is insane because that's not how it used to be. So you do have to go through Europe. I took a flight from JFK to Germany, to Frankfurt. I was supposed to spend a day there, but then can I name airlines? Can I?
Why not?
Lufthansa, I'm sorry, but I cannot recommend anybody Lufthansa anymore. They decided to cancel my flight and provide no information. I was supposed to take a flight from Frankfurt the next day to Poland, and they canceled my flight and everything. I was like, okay, how the hell do I get to Krakow? And thankfully, my friend who I knew in Frankfurt, he's like, hey, just take a bus. I'm like, what do you mean a bus? What bus will take me to Poland? He's like, just get this Flixbus. And I was like, okay. Funny enough, I was on a Flixbus for 14 hours with a Russian woman sitting next to me. I was like, okay. But yeah, I was on that bus for 14 hours, didn't get any real rest. I basically didn't sleep for like 3 days. But then from Krakow, Poland, which I had to get on a train there to, I believe it's pronounced Przemyśl or Przemyśl. I don't know. Everyone in Poland gives me a different answer to how to pronounce it correctly. Poles can please figure that out. But when I got there, somehow I ended up missing my train. It was not on the platform that I was told it was going to be on. Ended up getting a taxi with a Crimean Tatar, and he was a very funny guy. And he actually drove me at a discount to Przemyśl. And whatever. And it was a fun 3-hour car ride. I slept for some of it, like a little bit. He's like, why don't you sleep? You look like you've been through. I'm like, yeah, man, I did not get to, my entire plan fell apart, right? And so I was basically improvising the whole way through. And I remember waking up in his taxi and he played Empire State of Mind. Because he knew I was from New York. I even have a video of that. But eventually I got to Przemyśl. I got there early. I got on my train to Kyiv. And yeah, when I got to Kyiv, I got picked up by my family. Drove straight to Bila Cerkva. I slept a little bit. They're like, let him sleep for a couple hours. And then after that, we went to one of our relatives' apartments, and we had a nice little dinner. It was wonderful. It was really awesome to finally get that like traditional kind of dinner where you have all the traditional Ukrainian foods, borscht, homemade borscht. Oh my God. And for the next month, because I got here in December 9th in 23, for about the next month and a half, I kind of was just like, okay, let me explore, network, see, kind of plan things out. Let me not just go find a contract and sign it straight away. Let me actually speak to commanders. Let me speak to guys I know who are doing their thing here. But let me also explore Ukraine a little bit. Let me, really see how things are. I'm planning to stay for a long time. Let me basically assimilate. Get used to the pricing of things, get used to, all the stores, how to live like a regular person, basically, which is a very good thing to do. And eventually I signed my first contract, which was with the International Legion under Hur. Served with them for a little while.
People don't know the difference between Hur and then there's another one.
So there's ZSU. ZSU is the regular army. There's basically two legions. There's one that's under the regular army, the ZSU, and then the Hur, which is military intelligence. They both kind of have their legions. Hur likes to claim that they had the first one, which I'm pretty sure is true, but it doesn't really matter. They're both a legion with foreigners and also Ukrainians. The Hur one was great. It's much smaller as I understand it. It has its problems. But overall, I had a great commander. Our commanders were Ukrainian.
How was the training? Because you weren't a vet.
No, I never served. Literally, I never served prior to this. The closest I ever got to was we had an Air Force ROTC program in our college.
ROTC.
Which was nothing, which is a joke. It's Air Force ROTC. It was a joke. People used to make fun of us on the campus. I was like, that's a joke. I mean, there are a few things you'll learn there and there, but overall, it was not really much in the way of like coming here. But I had very good training, I would argue, for the most part. Could have been better.
Like? Talk about that. If you can, whatever.
I don't want to give too many details. We shouldn't, right? That would not be a good idea. Russians shouldn't know what our training is like. But I
care more about the experience, like for you as somebody who doesn't have combat, because this is your real first experience.
I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
The training was kind of designed more around the idea of you already have that prior experience, right? So at the very least, growing up in the United States, even in New York City, you can just go across the river to New Jersey. You can go to a shooting range, learn how to shoot and stuff like that. And my dad used to like doing that. So I had like at least some knowledge of things, right? I know how to hold a gun. I know how to shoot, thank God. But still, the training certainly pushed me a little bit. We had mostly Ukrainian instructors, but very like veteran Ukrainian instructors. Like they were all either SSO, some sort of special forces. They fought, even whether it was ATO and then post full scale. They knew what they were doing, right? They weren't just trying to do a job. They were there to try to train us, and they shared a lot of experience that we really needed. They showed us a lot. They told us what kind of works and really doesn't work, and It was tough. I mean, I was also not as physically fit as I should be at the time, but I lost a lot of weight, surprisingly.
How many kilos did you lose?
My first 4 months of service, roughly 15. But
a lot.
it's not just training. We had very good instructors.
How long did the training last?
So depending on what your background is, usually they'll put you through the 1 month like basic training, and then they do have courses. They changed now; it's a bit longer. I heard it's like roughly 6 to 8 weeks now. And then they also have other courses that are available. They have assault courses, I understand it. There's like a reconnaissance course you can take and everything.
Did they know that you?
They knew. They knew. I told them, and they're like, "We'll put you through everything." I was like, "Great." Not only that, but outside of the courses, if you're part of a good team, with a good team leader like we were, my team leader, I'll say his call sign Aries. Aries was great. He kind of grew up, looking for a military career, went through all the academies and stuff, served for a while, was in Bakhmut and everything. Young kid, he was 24 at the time, was a little bit older than him, and he was always leading the charge. He was always with us on mission. He was a captain. Love the guy, total respect to him. But he would have us training every day if we were not on mission, especially. So we were going through all of it. We did all the basics. We were exercising consistently, and that was the right thing to do. Because that also keeps us in a certain mindset. Essentially, it doesn't get you don't get too lazy. You consistently are in focus, and honestly, that's probably what helped keep a person like me alive.
How does that? So does the psychology of training shift you from this civilian that you were when you were in the States as an advocate and being advocating for Ukraine to being essentially this killing machine going out and protecting your country?
To be fair, what I'll actually say is this is where there's a fair bit of criticism where the training is a little Ukraine can't really afford to do like a good 6 months of training for everybody, right? So all the training is
because they need you out in the field.
Yeah. So the biggest problem I would argue is whereas in the U.S. military, in the beginning they don't really focus on let's just teach them how to shoot. They do break you down. They do change your mindset completely, right? Ukraine can't really afford that, so a lot of that happens after. For some guys. Some guys, honestly, I'll be brutally honest. Yeah, they can shoot well and whatever, but they're not really like soldiers. They're more like civilians in uniform who are pretty good at some things, right? But again, it all depends. It depends on the brigade and the unit. For us, for example, we were trying to consistently have a sort of professional environment, where we're supposed to be like soldiers. We're supposed to be professionals, right? I would say, for me, it kind of came pretty naturally in a sense. Like I really adapted to it. Probably again, if anything, that was the one thing ROTC kind of,
ROTC kicked in.
Yeah. Right. I joke. I'm like, guys, I learned nothing except for how to blouse my boots and how to march right. I was so surprised when uniform standards were maintained. I was like, damn it. I always was like, I remember going out and when we lived in Kramatorsk, I was the one who was like, oh, I'm gonna dress up in a uniform. I gotta look like a soldier. And my team leader was like, you're supposed to be in civilian attire. I was like, oh. I'm out there trying to blouse my boots. I'm like, where could I buy blousing straps in Ukraine? Which is a little cringy, but hey, I was expecting that. But no, we definitely had a professional environment, and again, it kicked in more naturally for me than most folks, right? Mm-hmm. For some folks, you really need to break them down. For me,
what's the breaking down? Like, what do you mean by that? Some folks you
gotta drill it into them. You gotta drill discipline into them. Well, I'll be brutally honest. Most human beings are not disciplined. Let's be honest. But you gotta drill them in. Basically, teach them routine, discipline. Give them some sort of purpose, essentially, which is probably what the military gives them. If there's one good thing that the military can do, it's that, right? Even I had friends who I remember in the States would prior to them joining the military, when they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with their lives after high school, and even some friends who went through college who then joined the military, a lot of them didn't know what they wanted to do, right? But they would join the military, and they came out of it like these just super awesome, disciplined people who, you look at them, you're like, damn, I'm like a lazy piece of shit compared to that person. He's getting shit done while I'm sitting here scrolling through Instagram. So I think it's that. I think, that if anything, as I understand it, the military really just teaches discipline and routine.
So what is it? So I'm really interested. You got into some really intense battles soon after you finished. So tell me about the first time you were actually deployed.
First time I was deployed was Kharkiv. That was like Kharkiv when it was the last major raid into Belgorod, which
Explain the raid. A lot of people don't understand the difference between like a
raid.
versus.
It was we call it an incursion. I'm not gonna get too deep into the objectives and stuff, but we basically went in there. We didn't go too far. We had our success, but of course there is the at least the minimal objectives that we were supposed to complete, and there were the overall ones that we wanted to. I'm not going to go into too much detail of how far we got, but it was essentially a short incursion meant to kind of sort of distract the Russians, and that was my first taste of real service here. At first, I was working more with our squadron's command. They really wanted me working in TOC. That's a tactical operation control kind of like center. And well, I knew the language, so I could translate, which they really needed at that time. But I wasn't really satisfied with that work. I was like, no, look, I did all this cool training. I got to be out there, right? Like, I want to be out there. I want more experience. I want to keep going and training. So eventually, I kind of got fed up with just being what we call an HQ rat. I was like, look, there's guys for this, and not only that, but the position that they wanted me to be in kind of required that field experience. So I told my squadron commander, I was like, listen, I want to be out there. So that's when I messaged our assault team leader, Aries, who I mentioned earlier. And I wrote to him, I was like, hey, is there any possibility at some point in the future I can get involved in your team? Like, I can get in there and go out with you guys. I didn't even ask to join. I was just like, is there even the possibility? And I almost got written up for insubordination because I didn't go through the proper process of trying to... They're like, you're trying to transfer without doing it the right way. I was like, no, I'm just asking a question. Eventually, yeah, after that, all kind of, stopped. Eventually, I had the discussions with him, and he's like, all right, I'll take you out, but, you got to keep training. You got to, do all this, and I trust you, and I'll see how you perform out there in the field. And then eventually, we got to go out and do all that cool stuff.
I hope you've been enjoying my interview with Yaroslav. This man came all the way from Brooklyn, New York, to return to his homeland to fight the Russians who are trying to colonize his country. And he needs your support. You see, Ukrainian soldiers don't have the money to get all the equipment that they need in order to be comfortable on the battlefield. And so it's not uncommon for soldiers to start crowdfunding campaigns in order to get various types of equipment that they need. And Yaroslav is no different. So what you can do is just go to his Venmo account and donate whatever money you can, right? That will help him get all kinds of things in order to help him do his job better. And you will be a big part of helping him fight Russia. So all you got to do, go to his Venmo account, give what you can. And the list of things that he needs is in the description below. Thank you all very much. Back to the interview.
What was that like? I mean, because that's the whole thing. We talk about, the battlefield situation where it's like, in a lot of us, I know I watch a lot of YouTube channels that show what's going on, particularly the trench warfare, etc. And it, like, as somebody who just studies it, like, I really respect how extremely dangerous that type of work is. But just take me into yourself about what it was like for you to go out. And, again, you ain't got to tell me the specifics. Yeah. More about, like, what it's like just to go out and actually have to do that type of work.
At first, it was definitely scary. I was very nervous. But as we started doing missions and stuff, and you get more and more used to it, Belgorod, interestingly enough, was not as intense as I thought it would be. By the time I got into the field, we already kind of did most of what we had to do there. So it was kind of at the point where we were just kind of backing out and starting to stabilize the situation, because we were also expecting a Russian counterattack. It wasn't, there were positions, there were trenches and stuff, but there was a lot of maneuvering. There was a lot of moving around at night. We had teams going out and doing their thing. We were defending positions. It wasn't like Bakhmut per se, like if you saw that kind of footage. It was a little bit more dynamic. There was more maneuvering. It was a very fluid kind of situation, right? It was definitely interesting. In Belgorod, I never actually got to, see the Russians per se, like when I'm close, like into I never got into like a real firefight there. That would happen after.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. So Belgorod was kind of surreal in a sense, right? Like there were times where I had artillery, drones flying at us, all that kind of crap. But it wasn't.
What do you do in that situation? Like when you have.
It depends on the situation, but if you're already in a position and you have cover, you take cover. Of course, when it comes to drones and FPVs, you get used to it. You gotta listen, and the thing about FPVs, people don't realize you could hear it coming, especially if you're not wearing your headsets.
First person.
An FPV is a first-person view drone. It's a kamikaze drone, suicide drones, and they're very, very prominent now in the battlefield here in Ukraine. But from an infantryman's perspective, which is something that people often forget, while drones are certainly prominent, drones are another piece of technology, and that's all that really is. I tell people, I'm like, drones themselves aren't going to evolutionize warfare. Warfare evolves around the infantryman. Drones are just another tool for infantry to kill other infantry with. We adapt to them. People ask me like, what's the greatest anti-drone like tool that you have? And I'm like, I don't have any physical tool. Cover and concealment has been one of the greatest counters to any drone I've experienced.
And by the way, I'm sorry for the time. Like cover and concealment, I learned these differences when I was doing my hostile environment training. So you break it, but I know what it is. But for people who don't
I'll give
know
you an
the
example.
difference.
For example, when you're in a good thick tree line, a lot of those FPV drones have a hard time getting to you. If you have a lot of nice green kind of foliage and trees and branches everywhere, a lot of times if they do try to get you in there, they'll hit something, they'll crash, and they'll just explode. And there is still, depending on the payload on it, there is still the shrapnel and everything, so it's not as safe. But usually that was our experience.
Because shrapnel goes up. For a lot
everywhere. It goes everywhere. If you know what a claymore is, even though it's designed to hit what's in front of it, there's still stuff that goes back to the side. So I'm not going to deny how dangerous FPVs are. They are. But
have you shot them down before? Or?
We have, yes. Which shotguns are great. If there's anyone who does, what is it called, like skeet shooting or whatever?
Yeah.
If you're good at that, you might pretty easily take down a drone if you're if you're good. So again, there's a lot of nuance to drones. The ones that really scare me are the Mavics. Mavics don't tend to be the suicide drones. They're the ones who carry a payload and they can drop it, because depending on the kind of Mavic, depending on the pilot and what kind of payload, and also how they design the system for it, they can be very accurate. It can be also hard to counter. I mean, those are the ones that usually should be easy to shoot down, but you'd be surprised. You'd be very surprised. I've seen people not be able to, but they're probably in like a state of panic and they're trying to they're blasting it, but they're not hitting it. Sometimes I've seen them take a bullet and like they're okay, and I'm like, damn. And that really makes you feel like shit. I'm like, oh crap. Mavics are really the scary ones. Those are the ones that, from my experience overall, from like everything I've experienced, the Mavics that have, we call them droppers. Those are the ones we have like all the really crazy amount of casualties, primarily wounded. It's always leg and arm wounds from those.
Have you ever been injured?
No, thank God. Thank God.
Is that pure luck?
Yes, I got very spiritual after enough experiences, especially post Belgorod. I'm like, damn, I'm very lucky so far. But it's not just luck. It's also just, look, I had people who trained me very well. I had some foreigners who I stuck around with who kind of mentored me. And part of it is also knowing what the hell you're doing and being aware of these threats. And you're going to, survive much longer and most likely end up not as heavily wounded.
It's interesting. I want to get to the part where you had the real firefight, but you talk a lot about your training, and do you notice people who don't have the same type of training as you, and they're just in more precarious situations that you would find yourself in?
Yeah, there were people who joined the Legion under ZSU, and they a lot of them didn't get the training they probably needed. There's even Ukrainians we've worked with that were part of like brigades that just didn't really put enough emphasis on training, and having to work with them was sometimes not that fun. These guys can be very careless. They'll go out smoke when they shouldn't be smoking, especially at night. Maybe they're just too confident for their own good, but at the same time, it's like those are things you don't do. They should be logical to you, right? It should just be something that makes sense. It's like for us, it's common sense, right?
Like taking a smoke break when you.
Yeah, like why would you want to walk out the blindage at night and smoke?
The blindage is.
A blindage is like a little dugout. I think in English the term is a blind or a blindage. But what we typically think of a blind or a blindage is very different from what it is kind of in Ukraine, where in Ukraine it could be like a little bunker in a trench, right? And we call that a blindage. And they come in all shapes and sizes. Some are great and well built, and they have like logs reinforcing them, and they could probably take a direct hit at least once from like artillery. But some of them can be very rugged, and I mean, it's cover, but God forbid something gets too close. It's also interesting to see how they get designed and dug nowadays, because there's also like measures to make it harder for drones to get in there to kill people. But still, like, you'll be there at night and there's thermal drones flying around, and if you're smoking, you can see that from a very long way. Like, you can see them far away with a thermal drone, even a thermal scope. Even just seeing it in person, you can see at night, you can see that, little light on that end of the cigarette. You might think it's not that bright, but you can see it from a very long way. And you got people who do things that they shouldn't be doing, and it's simply because they're not drilled into being like a soldier. They're, at the end of the day, they're a civilian who had to put on a uniform, pick up a gun, and fight. And they were taught certain things. They were taught certain skills, but they're lacking certain things.
We don't see, that's not something, a concept that we have in the States, because as you know, we have a volunteer military, and again, we have the luxury of training, because even both my parents were U.S. Army. My mom did 23. She was a drill sergeant, right? And so she actually trained people to go into battle, because she did the Iraq War, the first one. Yeah. And then she did, she was in Bosnia. Oh, wow. She did Bosnia under the NATO mission thing. Mission. And so, and actually, she also trained people at the range, like the range. Like, she did all of that, right? And so, they did a minimum of 2 months. I think it was like, and that was back in the 80s. Like, they did a minimum of that. And she talked about all the time that they put into you, saying that you're a soldier. And they drilled stuff into you like discipline. But you talk about the discipline thing. I remember, because at the start of the war, I was with the territorial defense, and oh my God, like, I'm not going to take up this particular time, but the guy had no trigger discipline, and he almost shot off my foot. And he giggled like, oops. And I mean, what could I do? I'm like, okay, I'm happy you didn't shoot my foot off. And and the guy gave me the shell casing, like, as a way to kind of like, I'm like, you fucker.
He kind of gave you the middle finger.
I mean, I don't, it was.
Yeah. It's a little morbid, but
it is. I mean, I can laugh about
cynical.
it now, but absolutely, dude.
There is issues of discipline, even with foreigners that come here, even foreigners who might have a lot of prior like military experience. You'll be very surprised.
Cowboys.
Yeah. It all depends on the motivation, really, and it also depends on what they did prior to that, how they got out of the military prior to that. So you have your issues all around. It's not just Ukrainians, I'll say that, but for Ukraine, it's a bit of a special case, because again, they're mobilizing the population. They have to. And
this is it. Just feels inevitable, though. Like, because you have to rush, and you have to put men, and women as well, onto the battlefield. Like, these problems that you're talking about, they were just bound to happen because of the situation.
Yeah, there was really no way to avoid it. You have to take the corrective measures after, which they did, and I've seen it. They do send people out when the opportunity is there, if there is the possibility to rotate them out, to put them through training, to get them what they need. I will say that sometimes, especially, there are guys who might not be well trained, but they're very experienced and they survived. And then they come back, and then they don't take training as seriously as they should. But that's also a very unique case of, like, how would you train that kind of person who has a lot of experience? I'll still be very honest. I would rather take the highly trained person with little experience to someone who has a lot of experience but is poorly trained. That's something that a lot of people don't understand.
Why?
Experience does not make up for the lack of training. That's just a fact. That is a fact. The fact of the matter is, when you go out with people who are highly trained, they're simply far more effective soldiers than the highly experienced ones. They're also usually a lot better motivated, and they're also a lot more professional. A lot of the very experienced guys, but poorly trained guys, yeah, they have interesting experience, but again, they're the ones who make a lot of mistakes, and they honestly survived more out of luck than anything. And that's a fact people don't understand. And there's just something that I have to combat with Ukrainians sometimes. I'm like, guys, like, we need to change our mindset on this. If you're poorly trained, you're poorly trained. I don't care how much experience you have. That experience is relevant, but you're not as professional as you think you are. And that's when you get cases of guys who have poor trigger discipline, for example. And I've seen that at the range with highly experienced guys who are in these crazy brigades who are assaulting nonstop. They've been through hell. But they're the ones waving the barrel of the gun around everywhere. They're the ones who have fully loaded guns that are not, they don't even have their safeties on and all that. And it's problematic. That is problematic. That's a lack of professionalism. They are taking, like, at the time that we're recording this, thankfully there's a lot of reforms going on. So the Ukrainian army is like changing up a lot. They're putting everyone through training. They're forming what they call the Korpus, which is basically a military division, Army Corps. And I'm seeing everyone get put through training. It's crazy.
Yeah, I hear you, dude. I want to talk about this. Yeah. You know, the time when you really went out into the firefight. You told us about it earlier, like what that experience was like.
Post Belgorod, that's when we got sent out to Kramatorsk because Chasiv Yar was happening. I think it was the 93rd or 92nd Brigade were stabilizing the line at the time. This is late. This is around April of 23. Or late, just the very end of March is when we got the word that we're going to move out. So, yeah, we got the word that they're stabilizing the line in Chasiv Yar, and it was absolute hell. Because the Russians basically, at that time, that was the main push that Russia was doing. It was that little city of Chasiv Yar. It's not actually that large of a sector overall. Once they stabilized the lines, they had to get rotated out, and in came the Legion and some other brigades that were there. It wasn't the entire Legion. It was just a couple of our squadrons. It was the squadron that I was in and another one. And it wasn't that much manpower, you'd be surprised. But we got sent there, and in the very beginning, the main mission set was, again, defend. Like, it was basically defend for as long as possible, because that was a time when that big aid bill was being fought over in the States. Yeah. And I do vividly remember, like, that becoming a problem, like, because Ukraine really needed that aid at that time. There were issues certainly with ammunition, certain things like AT rockets that we needed, grenades even. I was like, God damn, I'm not even seeing any
artillery rounds.
Definitely, yeah, we were lacking a lot.
155s.
Yep. We were lacking a lot. And then I remember going into that. I remember our squadron commander, even my team leader, like, damn, we're gonna get chewed up. Like, it's gonna be bad. We're fighting primarily, if I remember correctly, it was Russian VDV, which is their airborne, and it was like Marines. It wasn't the best of those, but it was like better than just some mobilized guys that they were sending at us. So we're gonna go up against guys who are motivated, relatively well equipped. Were there issues? Yeah, the Russians we were facing there, they didn't have a lot of armored vehicles, which is very surprising. They had tanks though, which were not fun. I hate everyone who tells me that tanks are useless in the modern war. You say that, and I tell those people, come here, sign a contract, and when a Russian tank knows where you are and it's firing at you, I wonder if you're going to still say that. And you have no means of fighting back. The Russians had a lot of tanks. They had very good artillery capability in Chasiv Yar. It was this wasn't Belgorod where we were just getting mortared, but it was relatively inaccurate. Even FPV drones were relatively sparse. I remember in the Belgorod missions, like, you'll have one FPV maybe in a day or two, right? Like, they were usually the FPV that came out, it had a specific target. So it was pretty accurate. And they also had Lancet drones. Lancets weren't really used against infantry as much. They were primarily for taking out, like, vehicles and stuff. That's what I saw, at least there. In Chasiv Yar, they were throwing everything at us. I remember the first mission we had where we were simply rotating a team out to defend a position in, like, a gray zone, essentially, because the lines didn't really meet. So there was a gray zone.
Describe a gray zone for me.
It's very simple. It's essentially an area between two front lines. Where the Russian main line is and our main line, and between that, before anyone sent forces to claim an area, essentially, it's a gray zone where it's contested. It's basically a contested zone.
And there could be people, villages, people who live there.
Yes, there were people that lived there, yes. It gets very chaotic because what will happen is, before there's a main push, they'll send out people to, kind of take positions. We'll send out people to take positions. We'll have our reconnaissance teams operating. They'll have theirs. It can get very messy because it's not very clear where is everything. and yeah, they were throwing everything they had at us. I remember my first mission. It was a 3-day mission where we did I maybe slept in those 3 days like 2-3 hours.
See, I don't see how that's possible.
I was surprised. I mean, look, I'll be honest. At the very end of it, we were so fatigued, and we were just trying to get back was pretty crazy. Our exfil was very, very hard.
3 hours of sleep in 3 days.
So maybe like 4, a little bit more. But we didn't have enough people to just tell, hey, you guys get some sleep. We'll kind of watch the sector, whatever. To be honest, we had a lot of energy drinks. I brought a lot of coffee with me, and if there was enough water to spare, you drank as much of it as possible.
I know you had to nod off during that time. Like, you
say that again?
Nod off. Like, you had to have nodded off. What do you do when people nod off, or people kind of just like elbow them?
Yes. Keep yourself awake. My team leader was right behind me because for especially Chasiv Yar was like a huge test for me, and he was in the same room that I was actually. And we had this interesting position. It was called VOG, the position, and I was the one who was guarding essentially the kind of the rear of the position and the right kind of flank of it. I would have to actually pop out the room because I had a door. I had to walk out, basically scan to make sure there was no movement, whatever, or I'd have to listen very carefully. I hated that because there was drones consistently flying over.
And this is in your trench area, or your?
We didn't have trench. We were in basically this kind of building. It was sort of like a repair. It was like a mechanic shop for trucks, like the large ones, the big ones. And it sucked because there was like huge windows and doors. Drones, FPVs were flying into our position. Thankfully, it didn't kill anyone. But I had 4 FPV drones fly into the little room I was in with my team leader, and our room had this like cinder block wall that split it in half. And it was like 3 bricks kind of thick, whatever. And so when the Russians figured out that there were people in that room, I would actually close the door. But because there was also artillery coming in, at one point an FPV hit the door, destroyed my door, which was annoying. And then after that, they had 3 more where they tried to actually fly in there. And they did fly in the room, but we would just take cover behind that cinder block wall. And we were safe. We were alive. Which sucked because they had some really crazy like ordnance on them, and it was loud. But we were okay. Oh, there we go. Air raid. So there we go.
Yeah. So I think this is the first time that air raid siren went off during the recording.
As I'm talking about FPVs coming.
Exactly. Yeah. The irony.
Yeah. I remember there was actually one moment where the Russians, because they were having a difficult time in Chasiv Yar breaking through our positions, we held our line, despite everything. I remember seeing a couple of Shahid drones actually fly into frontline positions, which is kind of unheard of. People are like that. There were a few instances of it happening in the war, because that's not what they're usually used for. But I remember
they
seeing
target
that.
Cities and,
Usually.
I'm familiar. We're all familiar with the sound.
Yeah. But seeing that trying to hit a frontline trench, I was like, what the hell? That was crazy. But it was only like 2 of them. Still seeing that was an experience. And I also got to see it in night vision. I was like, whoa.
What's it like? You were telling me about, if you could tell me about the time when you cleared out a position.
Yeah.
If you recall that story that we talked about.
Yeah.
What's that like for you? Because I want to talk to you about what's it like, once you make a decision that, okay, I have to clear out these positions and take out these guys.
So I'm going to be brutally honest with you. That you go full. I mean, you're definitely nervous and scared. But even in my first experiences, like with artillery and stuff, like you kind of go into sort of like fight or flight mode, but you also have your training. And you kind of just start thinking about like how I was trained. If you did a lot of the constant drilling and everything, you kind of start repeating that in a sense, This is why good training is very important, because it'll keep people alive. That's what a lot of people don't realize. Good training is what keeps people from panicking at times and trying to run away. So when you do stuff like that, yeah, you have your fear and everything, but again, you kind of fight that fear away. That's kind of what bravery actually is. That's what courage actually is being capable of fighting or kind of keeping that fear away from making the decisions for you, and you can just keep kind of doing.
Because you were saying once you clear, if you could describe it
Describe it in what way specifically do you want?
The first, because basically I'm saying I want to talk about the story about you actually having to what is it like when you you cleared out, like I think it was an artillery position, or two Russians were firing at you. You noticed
Oh
them?
no, that was just yeah. So with that was Chasiv Yar also. But again, we're operating in a gray zone, so from time to time, Russians do move around, and that in those situations, they will try to ambush our forces that try to rotate because they will learn our routes, and we do the same. We do the same. But again, that was my first. That wasn't the first. That was like the second real experience where I had bullets flying my way. The first experience was on my first mission where we were just guarding it, and we had two Russians come up, one with a machine gun, and they were basically firing into our position. And the whole point was, as I understand it, they were just trying to basically gauge our reaction. They knew we were there. They had their position somewhere nearby, and they were hitting us with artillery. They knew we were there, but they didn't know how many of us probably were there, and what capability we had. Commonly they will refer to it as recon by fire, and that was the whole point. It was shoot at us, get a reaction out of us, try to get the maximum reaction out of us, where everyone's trying to shoot and everything, right? And you can kind of tell what kind of forces are there, how many of them are there, what kind of capability they have, what kind of weapons they have, and everything. But we dealt with them pretty quickly. Grenade launcher. They were 50 meters from us, a little bit more. And we dealt with them without having to really overexpose ourselves. But I remember the moment the first bullets were like impacting them as I'm sitting there, and I hear those kind of like, it's kind of like a, I don't know if I want to describe like a slapping noise or whatever, but those first like impacts, and I'm like, oh crap, we're actually getting shot at. That's crazy. And you go into like this full training mode, like adrenaline starts kind of kicking in a little bit, and you just go into like an action mode. Honestly, I kind of understand the people now who tell me like war can be addicting. Like adrenaline is a drug. It's a real freaking drug. I can't say I like it, but it is a real thing. And you'll be very surprised. At the end of the day, it's the easiest way to explain it is training will basically teach you to control your fight or flight response, and it'll essentially kind of just drive you to operate a certain way. Yeah, that's the best way I can explain it, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I hear you, man. Like, but I remember you also describing the
Yeah.
frustration of not being able to defend the city as well as you
That
could.
was
You were
later.
talking about like,
Pokrovsk.
yeah, and you were talking about just seeing the ending of civilization.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'll
just
explain
describe that.
So that was way after Chasiv Yar. That was Pokrovsk. That's when I left the Legion and I got into the Presidential Brigade. And Pokrovsk was one of the few remaining actual large centers of civilization in Donetsk that was unoccupied. It was a very beautiful city. It's a very beautiful city. It's just like Bielotsadka, where I was from, but a little bit nicer, arguably. When I kind of explained that to you, it was one of those things where you have this beautiful city. It reminds me of home, and the front line after Avdiivka started getting closer and closer to Pokrovsk. Around that time, Kursk, the incursion into Kursk happened, and a lot of units and brigades, especially the reserve brigades in that area, got pulled into that. And I remember once that happened, we had a huge issue of we didn't have much reinforcements. The line was being defended by a lot of separate battalions. There was a lot of communication problems. It was just a mess. And slowly, the Russians creeped closer and closer to the point where there was a point where as the peace that existed there, the whole quote is peace is an illusion. That's all it literally was. There was more of a delusion at some point, honestly. I remember kind of like seeing how FABs were hitting the city artillery. There were drones at one point flying in the streets. I remember when there were drones flying in the main roads, and people were like, how the hell are there drones flying here? The Russians were close, but not that close to the point where there should be FPVs flying. There's the evacuations and everything that happened. And when you kind of see all that, and witness kind of just this beautiful, peaceful city just kind of turn into a ghost town. And I remember this is before any destruction. I think I told you it felt like being Will Smith in I Am Legend. Remember that film? Just I remember arriving at the center there at one point, and there was nothing. It was just quiet. No people walking around. It was just maybe a few parked cars. And I was like, what the hell? It was just completely gone. There was the evacuation that happened, which was really sad, honestly, because I remember seeing stuff like that in 2022 when the war started, right? You saw the civilians trying to evacuate, all the suffering. Remember the photos of the, people under the bridge, all the kids that were, kind of dealing with that. But I saw that all from like over there through my phone, through TV, all that stuff. And then when you see it in person, that was one of the things that had the most kind of like impact on me. Even like people are like, but what about the war? And I'm like, yeah, that was all hard and that all sucked. But when you witness that and you're also trying to defend that city and you're participating in missions, to do that, and you can't prevent that. It definitely had its morale impact. I remember on our team we had Ukrainians. We had this one Ukrainian. His call sign was Vladimir, which is like bear. He was a big, brolic guy. I remember sitting in a car with him one time when we were driving to this town called Dobropilya, which is north of Pokrovsk, which is where we moved to because it got too dangerous to be in Pokrovsk. And he even told me at one point, he's like, do you just have this feeling like we're not doing enough, like we're failing? And I'm like, I kind of get that. I do feel like that, right? Are we? No. Like, we're doing our job to the best of our ability, right? But you kind of feel like you're fighting against the inevitable. And it is what it is. Because at that time, with the current circumstances, I mean, what could we do? And the city, it's still in the news because it's an active part of the front line. At the time when we were there, it was the worst part of the front line. I still remember when we got sent to the southern kind of sector of it, of the main line, which is around the Kurakhivka area, and seeing all the stuff that was happening there. And it was a tough situation. We were pretty heavily outnumbered. The Russians were, doing everything that they can, and they were putting a lot of pressure on us. So, yeah, that's that. But that definitely had the most impact on me to this day. I still kind of remember seeing a lot of that. I'm like, damn, that really had an impact on you. Just seeing all that, all what you think is normal and everything just completely get destroyed. Seeing that with your own eyes, like that's an experience that is almost impossible to explain. Because for us in the States, that's stuff that we make movies about, that we fantasize in a weird way about. But when you see it in person, holy shit, like that was tough to process, right? War is one thing, but it's also witnessing normality and everything just fall apart, right, and just disappear.
I don't think I don't think. Yeah, there's no way unless you experience it. You're never going to expect that at all.
No.
But I think that goes to the last part of our conversation, which is about. Obviously there was an election in the United States and Trump won, and so. Now you have these conversations about peace negotiations. I've always had a problem with peace because it presumes because it presumes that both parties are culpable in the conflict, which Ukraine is not culpable in it. But I'm really curious about this talk about negotiations. Like as a soldier who's out there fighting, and you're telling us these stories. What do you feel about that?
I mean, I'll be honest with you. None of us have any real hope for it. None of our commanders are sitting here telling us, there's going to be peace soon. It's just not the case. The Ukrainian military is operating under the presumption that the war is going to continue, and we have to keep fighting and doing what we can. For us, people have to understand that I'm not against the idea of peace. If there is a way to actually manageably negotiate it, sure. But the problem that I also tell people, and this is something that I tell Americans, is we have different perceptions of negotiations compared to something like the Russians do. In our world, negotiations require compromise. That's normal in the United States, right? Both parties compromise to reach a deal. For Russians, compromise is weakness. They're going to only try to get the maximum that they can. They want to get the better of the deal. Whereas we think that, we have different values at the end of the day. And that's something that, unfortunately, with all of these attempts at all these negotiating attempts, whatever, it's not succeeding because we're trying to negotiate our way. And the Russians they're not going to negotiate. They're going to laugh at us and say, we're going to play this by our rules. And I don't know how Trump and the Republicans aren't seeing that. I don't know how they're not being, I don't know if they're being told that. But the fact of the matter is, we're not really I don't want to. When I say we're not looking forward to it, it's just we know it's not going to happen. We know what the expectation is going to be. I called it a mile away. There were when people say that, there were people excited for Trump in Ukraine. That's not true. We were just maybe hoping for a different strategy that might work. Biden gave us a lot, and Ukraine is very thankful for Biden, but we needed more. He didn't do enough.
Russia is on the wartime economy. America and Europe aren't.
No. And that became very apparent, especially with Europe. Now they're trying to make, they're taking different steps, of course, but whatever. When it comes to peace negotiations and everything, my commander said to me one time, he's like, let them play their games. Ukraine has no choice but to play along. And to some extent, it's also good that Ukraine is playing along, because Ukraine is kind of also showing to the world, like, Russia doesn't want peace. We already saw 2 meetings in Istanbul that went kind of nowhere. The only thing achieved was a prisoner exchange, which is still something. But there is no tangible steps being taken towards a real peace negotiation, and Russia is very clear on the fact that they don't want to. Medvedev just made a comment about it. He's like, listen,
drunk uncle. That's what people call drunk uncle.
Yeah. He made the position very clear. It's all political games for them. It's all political games.
Always been. But I'm curious about your thoughts about the ceding of land. So does that, because the thing is, you're fighting to keep the land, and then you're being asked to cede it.
There's my feelings towards it, and then there's also the reality of the situation. I don't want to give any land away to Russia. It's not their land. It never has been. It never will be. Whatever Ukrainians might feel about the history of Central, Western, Eastern Ukraine. Eastern Ukraine is deeply historically rooted. Like, it's Ukraine. This is like the steppe. This is where the Cossacks were from. All that stuff. I remember someone kind of described Eastern Ukraine as kind of like the soul of Ukraine, and I do agree with that. And I remember pre-2014, before the actual first time the Russians stepped into Ukraine, hearing about how well Donetsk was doing and seeing photos of the city and all that stuff, hearing from people who were there, their experiences of what it was like, right? I don't want to give any of that away. I don't. No one does, right? We just don't. Why would I? But then there's also the reality right now. We're not getting the support we need. The chances that we had to really take meaningful steps to get that back, we could not take, because, again, we're not being supported. Or the support that we're getting is just enough for us to hold the line where it is now, right? So there is the reality that we might have to cede some land. But I also caution people, because if Ukraine does have to cede land, then this is not the end of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Even if there is a sort of peace now, at the end of the day, there's going to be another war. And it's going to be a lot bloodier. It's going to be a lot worse. And it's not just going to involve Ukraine and Russia. It's not. It's going to involve everyone else, whether you like it or not. I do respect the fact that Ukraine is looking through every means possible to get the land back. I don't know if it's possible to get it back diplomatically, but it might be. I trust that the leaders here will do something. But the fact of the matter is, if we do have to cede land, it's just impossible for Ukraine to exist and cede land to Russia. It's just not. And the Russians are very scared of Ukraine and its capability. The Russians have, for decades, done everything they can to keep Ukraine down. That's a fact. Because Ukraine is very capable. There's a lot of potential here. There is just a huge amount of potential, realistically, economically. Ukraine can become extremely powerful and render Russia borderline just pointless. Ukraine alone could pretty much keep Russia down if we were able to reach our full potential. But we have issues. We had problems, and a lot of it is due to Russia and their constant just kind of influence that they were, their fangs that were just kind of deep within Ukraine. But we'll have to see.
My last question to you is, you touched on this moment that it's not just going to be Ukraine ultimately in the next case, and Ukraine ultimately sees land, if that's a possibility. So why should the rest of the world feel that, or particularly Europe and people in the U.S., like our home, why should they feel that this war will become theirs eventually if they don't take the necessary steps to support more aid and give Ukraine everything that it needs?
I mean, there's the easy answer to that because you want to avoid having to have missiles and stuff flying towards your home. You don't want to experience that, trust me.
Because we don't think that Russia will.
No.
Because people don't think
You
that
don't think
Russia is
so.
going to attack us. That's what people
They
don't think so.
They don't think so.
Hey, people will say there are no T-90s in Brooklyn.
Mm.
Really, that's
Yeah,
how people think.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. People don't think that, but the fact of the matter is we also thought they wouldn't attack Ukraine. And they did. When they see the opportunity, they'll take it and they'll do what they can. And we know what their plans are. They do want to rebuild. They do want to eventually go for other countries in Europe. They might not go all the way to Western Europe, but they definitely want to take Eastern Europe. And that will have,
Poland and the
Poland, the
Baltics.
Baltics, yes. And they'll try to go probably even beyond that. And if they can't control the land themselves, they'll try to influence the actual country itself to get as much control out of it as possible. Look at Hungary and Orban, for example. Look at Fico, and I believe he's Slovakia. And they do succeed, whether we like it or not. The problem is people don't realize is Russia is much more involved everywhere. They're involved in the United States too, and that's a fact. They influence us a lot more than they realize. They don't want to be our friends. They're not as noble as we are, unfortunately. That's the one thing about America, too. I tell people we're a little bit too noble and naive when we have to be real, because the Russians take advantage of that. And that's what it is. It's as simple as that. They're not looking to be our friends. They laugh at us and all that stuff. They're all that crap about them trying to be friendly with everyone. That's all propaganda. They're only friendly with you if they can control you. And that's just a simple fact. Ukrainians knew this forever. We've known this for centuries. We've been fighting them for centuries. So we know, look, we've already had how many deals, how many peace treaties, how much have the Russians, the Russians don't keep their word. They only know one thing, and that's strength. It's within their culture. It's within their style of negotiating. You have to be stronger than them, and you have to show that. And they won't mess with you, and that's that. They'll actually respect you probably, because they're going to be like, yeah, that man's going to destroy me if I try anything. And that's the only language that they know. That's simply how it is. They live in a very fundamentally different world than we do. A lot of them think that they're the center of the world. Remember, one of their politicians said, what is the point of this world existing if we're not part of it? These are the people we're dealing with, and it's that simple. Are there good people there? Sure. Maybe there are people who realize, yeah, our society is fucked. I've met these people who fled Russia and everything, but it's too few. It's too few. Overall, their society is more obedient than anything, and they simply accept the fact that it is what it is. So it's a tough reality we live in, but the best thing we can do is wake up to it and do something about it, and we can actually achieve some sort of real peace. We don't really live in a world of peace like, people thought, where we just think everyone's noble and everyone wants peace. That's just not the case. Let's wake up to that and realize that peace requires a little bit of oomph. You got to show it, we got to show that, yes, there will be peace, and we'll enforce that peace if need be.
Exactly.
We did that before.